Hello, and welcome back to our series where we are building a people and culture management system, or HCM, depending on the terminology you'd like to use. This series is brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, Principal Consultant here at Prairie HR Solutions. And where we left off was we created a function that would simply produce a um, alert up here when it ran, and it says something like, I'm the create function or something like that. Yep, I'm the create record function, and I have been called. So we were able to call a function based on the value of our drop down box here. Now, what I would like to do is focus on the create portion of our CRUD. And essentially, what that is users will come in, enter information in these fields here, and these fields just have placeholders and that go away. And there's over 80 of them. So I didn't have y'all sit here and watch me grab and create each one of these IDs. That would have been painful for you. But essentially, we're wanting to grab the values or the inputted values here and then send it over to our Google Apps script to append a row and write that to our sheet. Now, there's a few ways that we can tackle this. And this is our create record function. And you see this is where our alert's coming from. And this is all of our IDs. Now, the IDs are coming from obviously each individual input ID. So we want to call those. And we used to call those by get document, get element by ID. This piece right here. What I did, I'm going to approach it in a different way. I took all of our IDs and I placed them into an array. That way we're not going through and essentially typing this get document piece right here 80 times. So now we just have the IDs. And what I would like to do is take those IDs and put them into what's called an object. So we'll create an empty object and then assign these using a for each statement to those objects. We'll send that object over to our Google Apps script with Google Script Run. And then on our app script side, what we'll do is we will then convert that object to an array and then simply append the row. So let's go over to our main thing here. And let's just create a test function, because I don't know if we've ever actually talked about objects. So we know an array is that. An object is this, and it usually has values and keys. So let's just create a object here. So we'll say, let's give a variable actually. Let's just call it record. And this record is going to be an object. And an object is going to have something like this. So key value. And each little pair here is separated by a comma. And then let's just do another one. We'll call it email. And then we give a colon. And then the value of that email is, let's just do Jake add example, I guess. That'll work. And then we'll do another one. Maybe let's do age. And age, I'm not going to put my age in here. I'm going to put 25. There you go. Wishful thinking. Okay, so this is an object. Now, the way that we are going to receive it is this name piece will be the ID of the element, and this John piece will be whatever is put inside that element. Same with email, same with that. So we can actually change this, I suppose, to what our actual elements are going to look like. So instead of this name, it would actually be this, and then the email would be rec email, and this is going to be rec h. So these are actually the IDs of our input fields, and then these here are simply the values. So this is now an array. Now, if we write this array, what we could do, or when we write it to a sheet, rather, sorry about that, when we write it to a sheet, it needs to be in the form of an array. So we're going to need to convert this to an array. So now how we convert that to an array is, let's just create another variable here. And let's call this, well, since we're writing it to a row, let's just call it row. And this row is going to be equal to an array. Now, this array is going to receive data. So how we can access this, how we can access this John thing is we can simply put record, which is that object, dot, and then we access the rec first name. So now let's log this out and see what we have. And then what we'll do is we will log this out to show how it's actually looking. And it's going to look exactly like this. Okay, so let's do test. Let's run this thing. And there we go. So here is our object. So we know that this ID, this key here, equals that value, John. Rec age, 25, rec email, that. And we were able to turn that into an array by using that. Now, if we could just, essentially remove this array and then run it, it won't be in the form of an array, but it'll still give us the value of that because we're looking at the record dot rec first name. So what we're setting to this variable is we're telling it to first go to the record, and then this dot drills in further to the value of that first name. Now, when we write to a sheet takes an array. Remember, a single dimensional array is a row to a sheet. Two-dimensional, each additional row, or each piece is a row followed by columns. So now we have that. So how in the world are we going to write that to our sheet? So what we can simply do is come up here. Where is our sheet here? Let's see. Our sheet's name is employee data. So we're just going to need to use sheet. So how we can simply write this is we can simply go sheet dot append row, and that row is going to take, as you can see, an array, an object in the form of an array, but we already have that array because we converted it to an array. So instead of the square brackets, we can simply call that variable. Now let's give this some more. Let's also do record dot rec email, and this isn't going to be in order. That's the one thing that when we write to it, we got to make sure that these are in the orders of our columns that we're wanting to go to. And this is going to be record dot rec age. So now when we save it, and let's go over to our sheet here. Make this a little bigger for everybody. We're going to write this to the employee data. And I changed this, only got 50 in here, so we're not scrolling. It's going to append the row here at 52. So let's go ahead and run this test function. And now let's go back over here, and you'll see that on our sheet, it wrote the values of each one of those objects slash key value pairs. So that's how we can write to a sheet. So now let's go back over to our code and figure out what it is that we're going to do to get this stuff. So we have a nice little foundation for our Google Apps Script side. So let's look at our operations page here. So now we have this rec imp ID, last name, first name, and everything else is commented out for now. So first what we want to do is let's create that empty object. So let's create a variable and let's call it records, and then we'll just set that variable to a empty object. And what we're wanting to do is we are wanting to grab the values in here dynamically with for each, and then we want to get the value of each. Now remember, for each goes through an array, and for every single element it runs a function, and what we're going to want to do is give it the instructions to do this. So to do that, we can simply select our LEIDs. So we do LEIDs. So I had a cough there. And in our LEIDs, what we're wanting to do is for each element ID, for each element in there, we want to, I'm going to use arrow functions just because it's cleaner. We want to run a function. And this function is going to set each element's ID to this records field by getting its value. So essentially it's going to, for our records, for each element IDs, we want to get the value of that. How we're going to do that is typically this, except we're not going to pass any one thing through here because remember, we're doing a for each, which means we're already looking at every single element. So instead of putting an individual element in here, we just need to put the element ID. Now, it's not the entire thing. If we didn't have this for each, then yes, it would be the entire thing. But since we're using this for each in the function, it's saying that for every element, we want to get the value of that element and then set it to our records. So let's actually go ahead and I'm not going to put this in an alert because it's just going to be too big. So let's go ahead and get rid of this alert. What I'm going to do is a console log. Now, since we're working in a HTML with JavaScript, we can do what's called a console log. And if you've never done a console log, you can simply, on the screen that you're trying to assess, you want to hit right click. And let's go over here and show you. So let's go back here. Let's save it. Let's go back here to our page here. And let's refresh this. And we will go to operations, records, and then let's just type in, put my name in here. That'll be fine. So these first three, which is really all we're gathering at this moment. And then what we want to do is we want to go down here, choose our action, create record, and process. Now, nothing's going to happen, at least from what we're seeing. What we can do is come up anywhere on this screen and right-click our mouse, and then that will pull up a drop-down box. I'm not sure if you're seeing that. Nope, you're not seeing that drop-down box because of the way I'm sharing it. It looks like, but you can, once that drop-down box appears, you can scroll all the way down, and the very last thing is inspect. So you can click inspect, And then simply when that loads on the side there, you can simply come up here to the top where it says Elements Console Sources Network and click Console. If you're following along, you'll definitely know exactly what I'm talking about. And then down here at the bottom, you'll see Object. When you open it up, you'll see that the object is coming exactly the way that we wrote in our Google Apps script. So for the sake of those that weren't able to do that, let's just go ahead and set that to an alert. It's only 3, so I was thinking it was 80, but let's go ahead and set this alert here and see if the alert, I've never done it this way, but let's see if the alert populates the records. Okay, so let's refresh our page. But if you were able to follow along and you're working inside of a page, that console log comes in really handy because not only does it show you what it produces, but you can also drill down and see what it is that you can do with that. The console log provides additional instructions or methods on how you can do what you need to do with that object or whatever it is that you're trying to call. Okay, so here's that. Now we'll come down here. And one thing we're going to want to do, obviously, is when we hit process, we want to clear that. So we'll do that. Okay, so it's coming as an object. It's not actually giving us the values in the alert, which is what I thought it would do. The console log is, but it's coming as object. So that object key is going to be the ID equals to the value. That's how it's coming over to us. So now that we have that, let's simply get rid of that. So now we have all of this being getting the IDs and the values of those IDs and storing them in our records as a object key pairs. So what we simply could do is just like we did over in our Google Apps script side, we could, create this row thing and then pass the row. Or what we can do is take these object key pairs here, and the object key pairs we can then send over to our Google Apps script side and then do that here. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm trying to keep as much stuff happening over on that web page as possible, as least amount possible anyway. So let's go ahead and send that over to our Google Apps script side. And how we're going to do that is with this Google script run. Now we're not actually going to need to return anything back really. We're just sending it over there. So we don't need a success handler. We are going to need a function to send it to though. So let's think of a name. Let's just call this something incredibly original. And we'll just call this get record's not going to work. Let's call this push record. And what this push record is going to send over, the data that it's going to send over, is going to be this records. So let's go ahead and records. There we go. So now, once it does all this stuff, it's going to push over to our Google Apps script, find the function called push record, and it's going to pass to that function everything that's in this variable, which is our full object. Okay, so let's just say that in case web browser refreshes and I lose all of it. Okay, so now instead of this test, what we can simply do is call this push record. And remember that record, let's just keep it the same. Let's just say it's receiving the records. And we don't need this piece anymore because we're already providing that through records. So we're already getting the object. But what we do need to do is take this object now and turn it into an array. Because unfortunately, just straight, flat out the gate, um, you essentially can't write to a spreadsheet in an object as an object, the key value pair. You have to write it in an array because that's how Google Apps Script thinks of a sheet series of rows, row, column one, column two, column three. And it thinks of that in an array, so it must be in an array in order for you to append it. So now that we have this, what we can do is let's now save this. Okay, so let's go back over here to our sheet and refresh and give this a go. And let's refresh our page here. Now I'm purposefully leaving something misaligned just so we can see what is actually occurring and why it's occurring. Because right now we have our first name, but then in our example we used email and something else, age. That's right. But remember, we are only passing these first three lines. So although it will work, it will be missing information. So let's come down here and hit process. No notification, so we're going to have to figure that out. But when we go over here to our sheet, right here, you'll see it populated only the first name in this first column. So let's go back and figure out and see why that actually is. So let's go back here to our main. There we are. So when we are sending our array over, we are sending over the rec imp ID, the rec last name, and the rec first name. So we have the rec first name. So this is coming over in those three pieces of value. So when we try to set this array as records rec first name, we have a value for that. We don't have a value for the rec email, and we don't have a value for the rec age. So it's not going to produce it. It's just going to skip over it. So what we need to do is change our array here, and this is going to be rec imp ID, I believe. Yep. And then last name, then first name. And you want this to go in the order of your columns, because if not, it's going to populate it just like this. And if you want your columns to be aligned, you want to make sure that the order's in line as well. And make sure it's records, not record. And this one is going to be rec last name. Okay, so there we go. And an array does not end with a comma. Okay, so there we go with that. Now we could do this. There is another method. If you know JavaScript or have done this before, you may have sent it over to things like with names, like assigning a name to each input field and then looking for the name in the header and then aligning it that way. I tend, unless I'm the only one using that sheet, I tend to avoid that because it gives something else to fail if somebody changes that header. Those headers have to be exactly identical. And sometimes making them exactly identical means that they just look off or misspelled or whatnot, and somebody will want to go in and change that. And then the second they change that, that field's not getting populated because that name doesn't exist. So I just tend to do it this way, but there are many ways, and you'll find this throughout any coding language, really. There are many, many ways to do the same exact thing. So we're just going to do it this way for now. Okay, so we have that. Let's save it. And then we will come back over, and I'm going to leave this here because we're just appending the row. So it's going to come down to 53 and then populate. Let's go back to our sheet here. Not our sheet, excuse me, our UI. And let's refresh this and go to operations, records. Let's type something in here. Let's do 10. And let's do finger and Jacob. Spell my name right. We'll come down here to create and hit process. And then we'll go back over here to our sheet, and you'll see that now it is populating correctly under the correct headers. So now what we can do is go through and open up the rest of these, and then do the same thing that we're doing here to populate the rest of those data points. Before that, though, and I'm not going to have y'all watch me do that because that's going to be painful, so I'll do that offline. What I would like to do is after it pushes this piece, I would like to get the element, and just for now, I'll set it to something different. I want to get the element of this process button right here. This rec process button. Okay, right here. And I want to clear that out. So what we can simply do is get the element by ID, rec process. No, we don't want the button. What we want is this records action select. We don't want to clear the button. We want to clear the selection. So let's see where to go. Right here. So what we want to do is we want to then set, let's just do enter text to equals nothing. Let's try and do it that way to see if that will actually essentially clear it, and then we can set it to a value later on. Maybe we'll set it to selected or defaulted or something. So let's come back over. Let's refresh this and then see if it clears once we hit that button. Create record, and it clears. The problem is it cleared out the whole thing, so let's not do that. We don't want to set the inner HTML, because what that's doing is it's setting the inner HTML for that entire section. So instead, let's do value, and the value can equal that. And what we're going to set the value to is nothing. And for now, that will just simply clear it. And then what we'll do is we'll dynamically change it back to that selected value. We'll have to change its attribute, but not its attribute, but you know what I mean? Okay, so that cleared it a lot faster, and we still have our options. So that's how we can do it. We can just simply leave it like that. As you can see, we come down here, we can select our value here, hit process, and it immediately clears it. And we still have our options here instead of that inner HTML or inner text thing. Okay, good. So I'm going to end the video here. I'll go through and open up the rest of those IDs. Hope you enjoyed this video. And if it has been helpful, please hit that subscribe button. And until next time, please take care.